I want to hit constituent mass updates because I think this is going to come up as a use case for a lot of people. Data quality cleanup and updating custom fields on constituents can be a pain, especially if you have to go account by account in Bloomerang and navigate through each of those accounts to make the change. So we can actually use Google Sheets as an updating tool, a batch updating tool, to update constituent details, whether that's naming fields or custom fields. We can use Google Sheets to edit and update that information. So your organization might want to think about mass updates to save time on cleanup. You can assign custom fields. You can update constituent coding in batch. And you can also, to a certain extent, with some limitations, you basically get data entry in a spreadsheet. This is not always especially if you're creating new constituents, it's not always a replacement for the import tool, but there's certainly some use cases where this can support mass updating existing constituents in Bloomerang. So we're going to look at a workflow where if a transaction is received greater than $1,000, we're going to add a constituent to a spreadsheet. And from that spreadsheet, we're going to assign a solicitor and a prospect status. So we're basically going to think about this as like a major gift workflow. So someone gives a $1,000 donation, we're going to write them to the sheet. When they're in the sheet, they're not going to have a solicitor or prospect status. So we're going to add that to the sheet. And that's going to write back into Bloomerang the solicitor and prospect status that we've assigned. So like all of our use cases, we're going to start in our spreadsheet. You can see here I have a column here, column A called push to Bloomerang. I'll show you that in a second. We have the constituent details, and then we have the two fields that we're going to edit in the spreadsheet and write back to Bloomerang. So let's go into Zapier and take a look at how this is built. So this is actually a two-step or a two-zap flow. First, we're going to look for anyone who's given $1,000, and we're going to write them to the sheet. So this is not dissimilar than all of the other workflows we've already looked at. We're looking for a $1,000 donation. We're only going to continue if the constituent solicitor field and prospect status fields don't exist. They're blank, meaning they're unassigned. And we're going to write the constituents information to the spreadsheet. Now let's look at the next flow, which we'll go through in a little bit more detail. This flow is going to trigger on my Google Sheet. So when I make an edit in this sheet, I want my Zap to run. So my trigger event, editing the Google Sheet, is going to be set up as the first step of the Zap. So I'm going to choose Google Sheet. And in this case, I'm going to select Updated Spreadsheet Row. I'm going to choose my account. I'm going to choose which spreadsheet I want to trigger on. And I'm also going to select which column I want to trigger on. In this case, I'm going to trigger on the Push to Bloomerang column. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put an X next to the rows that I want to push into Bloomerang. So you can think of this like an on-off switch. So I'm setting the trigger column again, push to Bloomerang. So when this is updated, this trigger will run. I get some sample data. You can see this is row 5 here. Row 5 is just some sample data that I can use. And then I'm going to update the constituent in Bloomerang. So I'm going to choose Bloomerang as the app, update constituent as the action. I'll authenticate. In this case, because a constituent must be updated based on the constituent's ID, this is a perfect duplicate check. I'm going to map the constituent ID that I wrote with the prior step. So this field right here, constituent ID from Bloomerang, I'm going to use that as my key to update Bloomerang. The constituent ID is not the account number. The constituent ID is an API field, so you'll have to be cognizant of that. But you'll see here, let me open this up. There is an instruction as a reminder to update constituents dynamically. Choose custom to map the ID from a find constituent step. This is our find constituent step with our ID. So we're mapping that in here as custom. From there, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to update only two fields, the solicitor field and the prospect status field. So I'm going to map those in from my trigger here and my status field here. And then I'm ready to go. So I'm done editing. I turn on my Zap. And now, expand this a little bit, working with two windows here. So let's go to Bruce Wayne. And let's add a new donation for $2,000 to get us over that threshold. So there's our row. We just had a major gift come in for $2,000, so we've added this individual to our list. And now what I want to do is I want to assign the solicitor and prospect status to this account. So you'll notice on Bruce Wayne's account, I do not have a solicitor or prospect status. So what I'm going to do is in this sheet, I mark J as our solicitor and our prospect status is active. And then I'm just going to put an X here to push this to Bloomerang. Then we wait for that to run. And you can see when I refresh, now I have a solicitor and a prospect status assigned. So again, in summary, what we're looking at here is we're looking at the ability to have a constituent in a sheet and then enter data in the sheet to populate our Bloomerang database. One key concept. With the flexibility of Google Sheets, it could be interpreted that we're advocating for using spreadsheets to replace data entry and direct navigation with Bloomerang. And that could not be farther from the truth. Bloomerang is your central system in your technology stack. And what we want to do is we want to use integrations to supplement your Bloomerang experience, not replace it. If you'd like to get in contact with us, our email is at the bottom here. We build Zaps and custom integrations for Bloomerang users. You can learn more about that on our website. Again, I want to be clear that Zapier is designed for everyone to design integrations. But if you do feel like you need a little support on heavier lifts, that's certainly something we can help with.